A big thanks to Dave Morrish for writing this review. He's got his own channel called Game It Up. We'll pop a link to that in the description and a top pinned comment. Do go check it out. Now, the Pedestrian is a 2D puzzle platformer originally released on Windows, Mac and Linux in early 2020. It's since been released on PlayStation and Xbox, where it was, it's fair to say, very warmly received. But did the Pedestrian remember to look both ways before crossing over to the Switch? Or is this one a car crash? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. In the Pedestrian, you take control of the stick figure-like person you'd typically find on a toilet or road sign. The gameplay takes place in a 2D environment, as you're always inside a sign, poster or screen of some kind. Now the controls, they're pretty simple, pressing A or B to jump and Y to interact with things. Alternatively, you can zoom the camera in and out by pressing X, and this shows the overview of what's essentially the main meat of the game in its puzzles. Each sign you enter acts as its own mini-stage that you need to find your way through. Getting through to the exit door will take you to the next area, but most of these will have multiple signs, with the exit being on a different one that you appear on. Once you've zoomed out the camera with the X button, you suddenly take control of the cursor and you can easily see all of those panels. Now each of these will have different doors or ladders in them with a black semicircle marked by them just outside. You can then move the cursor over them and hold A to draw a line to connect it to another door or ladder. This creates an access way for you to cross. It's very cool as you move between those two panels. Now it's not as straightforward as that, obviously it wouldn't be very fun, as the semicircles have to match up. A right facing door needs to connect to a left facing one, as well as an up facing ladder, whatever that is, can only connect to a down one, and the line that you draw to join these together can't pass over a panel. And you'll be using that cursor to try and line up those doors and ladders comfortably. However, if you're playing in handheld mode, you can thankfully use the touch screen to move the panels and also draw your lines. And realistically, this is the best way to play. It starts off quite simple, as you'll only be required to find one way to match everything up before you travel to the next area, but things definitely get more complex as you go on. There will be some that require you to use keys to open doorways, switches that turn off lasers, and boxes that need pushing, which can only be done in a very precise, specific way. It becomes not only a task to arrange the panels and doorways correctly, but to then navigate and perform everything in the correct sequence. Although you're free to manipulate things however you please, once you've used a certain doorway, you cannot change where that then leads, otherwise the puzzle resets. Thankfully, there are clear indicators to help you remember where you've been, such as solid black lines indicating what doorways you've created, dotted ones showing the doorway you've attempted isn't possible, and black and white stripy lines show a doorway you've used and are unable to alter unless you want to reset. It might all sound complex, but realistically, once you've played a few of these puzzles, it begins to make sense and is easy to understand. Now the puzzles themselves were really cleverly designed. I mentioned the common ones of finding keys and pushing blocks, but as it progresses, more ideas were being thrown at me, such as archways that can be overlaid onto other panels, and things in the surrounding environment that can prevent certain ones from being moved. Throw in that some of the areas have multiple exits. This acts as a central hub that requires a number of items brought back to them, such as a key, battery box, and each exit takes you to an area that has one of those items. I enjoyed those the most, as it felt like I was working towards something bigger than just finding the way out, even though in fairness, that is exactly what ultimately happens. I found out that when I got to a new area, it would sometimes feel a little overwhelming, and I'd spend a little while zooming out the camera and staring at each panel, just taking it in. But even when the area felt daunting, just simply making a start, moving things around and joining up doors, even if these were the wrong choices, it eased me into it and helped me to get familiar with each of them. There was an element of trial and error, as you'd expect, but that's how these sorts of games tend to play out. Overall, the gameplay brings a unique twist to the puzzle platform genre, and the new elements were being introduced as the game progressed at a decent rate. There were a fair few noodle scratches here and there, and the game never held my hand, and I was free to work everything out on my own with little to no prompting, but it never got to a point where I was finding it more frustrating than fun. The controls were very simple and worked really well, and the touchscreen controls were very intuitive and made playing in handheld mode the best way to play, and it's just really nice to see a developer take the time to implement that on the Nintendo Switch, not something we always see. Gameplay for me scores a very good 17 out of 20. Controls score an even better 19 out of 20. Now, I have described this game as 2D, which it certainly is in its gameplay, but the world itself surrounding the signs is presented in a wide, detailed 3D environment. There are a range of locations, such as an office, or on the barrier for some roadworks, which contextualizes the signs or posters you're playing in. You'll start out in an office area, playing across papers pinned to a wall, and eventually find yourself on metal signs out in the large world, even at one point operating a train. The level of detail is impressive, as you'll see things such as litter on the train track, traffic and trains driving past, or graffiti on the walls. And I had no issues with performance whatsoever, even when there was a lot going on in the background. There's a shallow depth of field giving those backgrounds an out of focus look, which helps you to focus on the puzzles at hand. Now, the music is lovely to listen to when it's actually playing. There are times I'll get to a new area and I'll have an upbeat tune play, but other times it'll be a little quieter, which can create an atmosphere which would work well if the music was more contextualized. Having the louder jazzy tunes playing in a city centre or a calmer piano song playing in a park, that worked, as well as having the quieter moments when underground. But there are times when I was a little confused, such as when I'm underground and have this whimsical music playing quite loudly and then it suddenly stops. And I'm doing the rest of the puzzle in silence. I think they could do a little there to fix that and improve the way that plays. Overall, I was impressed by the game's presentation. The realistic setting added context for all the signs you're traversing, as well as you sometimes manipulating the real world. It adds a lot to the immersion, and the music was a joy to listen to, but it needs to sync up a little better and also not drop out. Visuals and performance scores 17 out of 20, and sound and audio scores 15 out of 20. This one retails at £15.09. It looks like most people can play through the game in around 4 hours or less, which in my experience is pretty standard for this type of game. Maybe I'm just a genius at these. Yeah, Dave, I'm going to cut that line out. But it may seem a short playtime for a lot of people. But it's not all about the length of a game, it's about the experience, and I think the quality of this one and the enjoyment I got out of it certainly are big, if not the key factors. Sometimes these types of experiences aren't too replayable, especially if you have a very good memory. This was my second time playing through the game, and honestly I'd forgotten absolutely everything. With that said, if you were going to play this quickly after the previous time, certainly the replayability isn't the best, even if it does offer quite a memorable experience. I give value 14 out of 20. In conclusion then, the Pedestrian is a really enjoyable, albeit a shorter experience. It has a unique premise, puzzles that get progressively more challenging and more rewarding as you go on, a fantastic looking world that contextualizes the gameplay perfectly, all the while being completely playable with those lovely touchscreen controls. Sure, it might be a bit pricey for some, and there was a bit of an issue with that music. It gets a very well-deserved score of 82%. So thanks again to Dave. Do go check out his channel, Game It Up. Any channel that has up in the name instantly gets more brownie points for me. And it's had a big old rebranding and it's looking good over there. So yeah, go check it out. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content, to our Patreons and our members. And yeah, anyone that leaves comments down below for us to read and have a good old chinwag with. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!